Can you hear me? Yes?
Hello, everybody. Warm welcome to everybody, and thank you again so much. I know we're getting near the tail end of COP. The people who are here are the people who are truly committed. So thank you very much. So first and foremost, a huge thank you to the NDC partnership, who have been instrumental in this entire effort to make sure that climate policies are well framed and really address the needs of people who they are meant to serve. And before we start, I'd also like to thank everybody here who are in attendance. Like I said, these are the people who are truly committed. Today we have a pretty amazing panel, both on the panel, and so here would like to start off, we'll have some opening remarks from Kitty von der Heijden, who's our Deputy Executive Partner for Partnerships for UNICEF. And on the stage, we have Amanda McKee joining us from the NDC Partnership. As well, we also have Brenda Mwale, who a fantastic young person who'll tell us about the activities that she's doing, and Ms. Pereira from Uruguay. So as we get started, before we do, so a few words from Kitty.
Right, so thank you very much for being here. As you say, the last few standing in the last few days, that we can still make a difference with and for children, and there's nothing more important than that. So thank you, Gautam. Thank you, colleagues from NDCP, for hosting. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you for our audience. What we're here to discuss is this: evidence-informed NDCs for and with children and young people. And let me tell you from the outset why that matters. We've done our own research in UNICEF. What does the risk analysis tell us? It tells us that no less than 1 billion children are at extremely high risk of climate change. Extremely high risk. What does that mean? Well, everybody will think of flooding, right? Flooding, and what does that do? Well, if you can't swim, that's pretty problematic. It leads to vector-borne diseases. Everybody reads about these things in the newspaper. And then we read in the newspaper about the opposite side of that: droughts, droughts, droughts in the Horn of Africa and in the Sahel. And what does that do? Well, crop starts to wither in the field. It leads to malnutrition. And it leads to, in some of the places that I've worked, like Ethiopia, with prolonged droughts, you get what is called stunting. What is stunting? It means that you have not had nutritious food for so long that you will be lifelong cognitively impaired. It's irreparable. That's what I call climate injustice. This need not happen, but it's happening to our children right now, right here. What is the impact that nobody talks about? When this happens, like a place in Ethiopia, I was meeting the Ethiopian minister 2 days ago, child marriage goes up 130%. And again, here we're talking about an equity issue. This is about girls. It's not about boys. It's always the girls that get married off. Young girls, age 11, 12, 13 years old. In Bangladesh, the same thing. If a heat wave hits that lasts for over 30 days, we see from the evidence child marriage is up by 50%. That is why we keep saying in UNICEF, the climate crisis is a planetary crisis, but it is also a child's crisis. It is changing our children, and it's a gross violation of the rights of children everywhere. What also no one seems to talk about when we talk about climate issues and climate impact is that it actually starts before children are born. Because what we see in heat waves is that women deliver earlier than they're due, with all the risks that come with that for newborn children. What nobody seems to talk about is that the composition and quantity of breast milk of mothers is changing, and newborn children bear the brunt of that. And because babies are so small, they simply cannot cope with the heat, and that leads to organ failure. All these things are violations of the rights, are violations of what we have agreed in Paris. What did Paris say? When taking climate action, and I quote, states should respect, promote, and consider the rights of children and integrate intergenerational equity. Now that yet has to translate into what I call climate policies. It has to translate into different funding streams, because what do we see? At this moment, less than 50% of the NDCs are what we call child sensitive. Less than a third have been made with the participation of young people, and even less, 3%, have been made with the involvement of children. As we're here in COP28 to try to keep the 1.5 alive, I want to keep human lives alive. I want to keep children's lives alive. That's why these NDCs matter. That's why the next generation of NDCs must be better, and we must have child rights smack in the middle of everything we do in the next generation. That's why the NDCP matters so much. That's why this discussion matters so much, because we can and we have to do much better. The climate is not just changing the planet. The climate is changing our children. The climate crisis is a child rights crisis. Gautam, I am looking to you to moderate this panel for ambitious outcomes. We're going to have to embed the perspective of young people in the next generation of NDCs. If we don't do it now, we're going to have to wait another 5 years. And I am fed up. I do not have the patience for that. So let's get going. Over to you. Thank you.
Kitty, thank you so much. And that really set the scene for why this is so critical. We know that children and young people have to be at the center of climate policies that are for them, and whose decisions they are going to be the greatest victims or the greatest beneficiaries of. And here on this panel, we have some of the people who are instrumental in all facets of making that actually happen. So first, Amanda, from the NDC partnership, the premier organization in terms of steering and guiding the quantity and quality of nationally determined climate policies, you've been at the coalface of trying to get this process through. Can you tell us a little bit about what the successes have been of trying to make sure children and young people are at the center, but also, let's be honest, what the challenges have been?
Well, first of all, I feel like the pressure is on. I feel like Kitty really soundly and effectively communicated why we're here and why this is so important. And this isn't just another topic that the NDC partnership works on, but this is core to the work that we do. We developed a youth engagement plan together with UNICEF, together with other partners, and it's one of the plans, it's one of the strategies that guides all of the work that we do. So I want to start by emphasizing that this isn't a side issue. This is really central. From our members, and from participants from our annual Youth Engagement Forum. This is a forum we have every summer where we bring together youth from around the world, where we bring together our members to talk about issues. We've heard a lot of challenges around how to meaningfully engage young people in climate action. But we've also seen some innovative solutions. There are a few categories that I wanted to look at. And the first is really around commitments. We're walking into a moment over the next 2 years where countries are going to be updating and enhancing their NDCs, and we really need to take advantage of this opportunity to strengthen the voice of youth in the process. The UNICEF data platform, which we've been looking at a lot recently, shows us that we're off track when it comes to child-sensitive NDCs. So there's a lot of work to do. We've seen this in the long-term low-emission development strategies as well, where only 15 of the 45 that were reviewed have significant youth mentions. And this is new analysis that will be shared next month. Our youth engagement plan, it highlights some of the steps that countries can take, that partners can take to help to strengthen youth engagement. Members of the partnership are also thinking about long-term planning. So skill development, green jobs, economy-wide transitions. We actually had a high-level breakfast this morning looking at these topics. These are topics critical to youth. And we have development partners, implementing partners who are ready to step up here. The second area that I wanted to touch on is on deepening engagement. So we've now hosted 3 youth engagement forums, and we've had hundreds of participants who've come and shared their challenges, their experience, and networks with others around some of these creative solutions. And we've certainly heard from young climate leaders that they want access to decision makers, and they want access to decision-making spaces. And this is more than just observers or one-off participation in these forums, but how do they be part of negotiations? How can they meaningfully be part of policy drafting, but also the financing solutions that countries are going to need to bring these actions to life? Young people are also asking for capacity building to really make the most out of these types of opportunities. And so this includes capacity building to actually engage in these processes, capacity building to benefit from the outcomes that come. And I think it's important, and when we were discussing this yesterday, youth it's not a homogeneous group. We often talk about engaging youth. And it's really important that as we're thinking about this, we're looking at the different needs, ranging from a basic understanding of what climate change is and how it impacts us, all the way to some of the sector-specific technical knowledge and expertise that we need youth to have to really benefit from these opportunities. And the last challenge and opportunity I wanted to raise is on finance and resources. And so we know that access to finance is off track, generally, but also when it comes to young people. In our youth engagement forum over the past couple of years, we've actually focused specifically on the topic of climate finance for young people. And we've heard a few things. First, that funds need to be tailored to young people's circumstances. They need to be accessible as possible and innovative in their structures. Participants also noted the important need for mentorship around finance to really ensure longevity and sustainability of their initiatives. So not just providing finance, but actually providing them with the skills to build on that and to carry that work forward. So despite all of this work, the last thing I want to share just as a concluding statement here is if we look at the requests for support that we've received through the partnership, only 2% of these requests touch on youth. So this is really an untapped opportunity. That doesn't mean, and I know I saw the sigh that, ooh, that's bad, that there's not more work taking place, but when we look at youth as a deliberate stakeholder, as a deliberate beneficiary, it's only 2%. And so it tells us, especially when we, as I mentioned, looking at youth as more than just a homogeneous group, just as more than a box to tick, that we need to be integrating it into requests so that we can really build the systems for young people to benefit, well, to engage, first of all, and to benefit from the NDC process. So the UNICEF platform, the data that you're doing, this is something that we're really looking forward to engaging in, to seeing how we can use it to scale up these efforts. And I would just conclude by saying, and it's on the wall, but I'm gonna edit it, by acting together with young people and children, we can achieve more. So thank you.
Amanda, thank you very, very much. Next, if people would like to put on their headsets, they can, because Ms. Pareja, who's the Director of Climate Change for the government of Uruguay, is going to be delivering her remarks in Spanish. So, Ms. Pareja, thank you. Ms. Pareja, we've heard a little bit from the NDC partnership from a sort of a multilateral lens as to some of the incredible opportunities, but also the challenges of involving young people in the process of framing their NDCs. We would love very much to hear from you, from your experience in Uruguay. What has been your experience in involving young people as part of the NDC process, both what has been good as well as what we can learn from, and your view also how we can take what is there in the NDCs and really make it work for young people when it comes to finance and when it comes to implementation. Over to you, madam.
Bueno, ¿se escucha? Sí. Bueno, muchas gracias por la invitación. No sé si está... ¿No? ¿No se puede? Bueno, tenía una presentación, pero bueno, me parece que nos quedamos sin ella. Así lo hacemos más divertido. Bien. Ah, ok. Permiso, paso por acá. No, no es,
No.
a ver, no es esta mi presentación. No, para así, no, 2 minutos.
We'll give it.
Bueno, vamos a sin presentación entonces. Bueno, primero que nada, me gustaría empezar hablando un poco de la institucionalidad también de nuestro Ministerio de Ambiente. Nosotros tenemos un Ministerio de Ambiente que es joven, tiene un poquito más de 3 años, y junto con la creación del Ministerio de Ambiente también se creó lo que es la Dirección Nacional de Cambio Climático. Y esto entendemos que fue como una oportunidad también para que los jóvenes vieran el ámbito, digamos, ideal para poder empezar a golpear puertas y decir, bueno, queremos participar en estas instancias, queremos ser promotores de estas iniciativas y también estar vinculados a lo que es la construcción de las políticas públicas en materia de cambio climático y ambiente también. En ese sentido, en el año 2022, nosotros, junto con UNICEF y con el Programa de Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo, con el PNUD, iniciamos todo lo que fue un proceso de acción climática joven, que es una iniciativa en el cual abarcó a jóvenes, el primer año, a jóvenes de alrededor de 40, 50 jóvenes, entre 13 y 22 años, que participaron en varias instancias y talleres con técnicos también de la dirección para, primero que nada, involucrarlos en la temática, o sea, que entendieran lo que era, más allá de lo que puedan leer o lo que puedan entender o escuchar, que entiendan desde el gobierno qué es el cambio climático, cómo se trabaja el cambio climático, cómo se entiende el cambio climático, para ellos, para que al final de ese proceso, el año 2022, ellos pudieran tener herramientas para poder volcar sus opiniones o sus comentarios dentro de lo que fue la construcción de nuestra segunda contribución determinada a nivel nacional. En ese sentido, nosotros tomamos insumos de los jóvenes para que fueran por primera vez en la NDC volcados a este documento que fue presentado a fines del año 2022. Y bueno, y eso fue como un primer puntapié para poder trabajar en estas iniciativas. O sea, hubieron cerca de 7 talleres entre lo que fue marzo y noviembre. Luego, bueno, ahí se presentaban iniciativas, se hizo todo un trabajo metodológico con unos kits en el cual ahí se sacaron algunas ideas de cuáles podrían ser los temas que les podrían interesar y dónde querían hacer foco como jóvenes. Porque, bueno, obviamente las políticas climáticas son políticas a largo plazo y, bueno, se entiende que la mirada de los jóvenes sin duda tenían que estar involucradas en la NDC. Ahora Uruguay está trabajando para construir la NDC que se va a presentar en el 2025 y bueno, la idea también es poder seguir construyendo y trabajando en el mismo sentido, así que básicamente vino por ese lado. Lo mismo lo hicimos este año, también participamos en otra actividad de acción climática joven, pero más involucrada, más sectorizado en el norte del país, que es una zona vulnerable, es una zona que suele inundarse cuando hay precipitaciones, sobre todo en el sur de Brasil, que toda la precipitación se arrastra hasta la que es la parte sur del río Uruguay. Y bueno, y ahí un poco involucrarlos en lo que es la agenda, local de cada uno, que cada uno pueda construir su propia agenda local, aprender sobre ello, y bueno, y ahí también participaron varios jóvenes, casi 60 jóvenes que están participando, presentaron proyectos que podrían hacer en su localidad, y bueno, ya estamos en una instancia que estamos evaluando los proyectos, para poder, para que puedan tener también un incentivo que puedan para poder llevar a cabo esa actividad que se propone. Así que bueno, básicamente fue esa la propuesta.
Madame Pereira, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time out to be here, because we know how intense negotiations are also getting and how busy you are, so thank you so much. This has been an amazing experience. There's so many questions that I'd like to ask, but before we do so, Brenda, and first of all, thank you so much for taking the time out from coming all the way from Malawi. We've spoken a little bit about the importance of having this organizations and a global structure around which we can have these critical climate policies. We've heard from Madame Pareja about the importance of how you need to involve young people at the national level and some of the successes as well as some of the challenges, which we'll get to in a little bit, of making sure that young people feel that they're part of the process, but also that what comes out of the NDC is critically important to their particular needs. But Brenda, we'd love to hear from you. What's your experience like, as well as the people you work with? What has worked well in terms of having young people be part of the process? And also, frankly, what hasn't worked well?
All right, thank you so much. So my name is Brenda Mwale. I work with Green Girls Platform in Malawi, and it's a female-led organization. We work with girls and young women and how they can be actively involved in the climate space, understanding how vulnerable they are to the impacts of climate change. So I've been in the youth space since I was like 15. That's when I started doing different interventions in my community. And then I can say I was lucky to be part of the young people that were like consulted when Malawi was reviewing NDCs in 2021. It can be for the better because it also helped me to do what I'm doing right now. So I remember I received a call from somebody and they were like, oh, I'm a consultant working on the review of NDCs and would like to have a call with you and a few other young people where we can have like your views. And then we did, and it was like 6 of us. A week later, our NDCs were like out. So for me, it was like, okay, was that call really that meaningful? Or it was just like a matter of like ticking the box to say young people were like involved in the process? On the other hand, I also have my colleagues who are based in Zimbabwe. And for them, the experience was quite different from how we were involved in Malawi, because for them, it was like young people themselves who were like leading the process. They conducted 3 workshops, like regional workshops in like different regions. By them, young people being in the forefront, because it doesn't necessarily mean that young people don't understand what NDCs are. There are others who like understand the process. So sometimes it's really better if you like involve them to like be in the forefront and like peer educators, so that they can also be able to learn and also understand how their fellows are actually understanding the process. So for them, it was a matter of starting from teaching their fellows, like others from like little communities, and helping them understand what NDCs are, and then learning from them what can they do as they're carrying out the interventions. How can they be part of the NDCs? Because like national determined contributions, you are just trying to achieve like as a guiding tool on how we are going to achieve our Paris Agreement, right? So for them, like for me, it was like a learning point to say, I think we're really far. But then it's not really a matter of like just trying to blame the government to say we are not involved. I think there's something I can do as well to say, how do I ensure that others can actually get to understand what NDCs are? So that's when with Green Girls Platform, we started doing policy learning sessions in communities to make that as the starting point. Because as we are trying to push young people to get involved in policy advocacy, that has to be evidence evidence-based, so that they can get to understand what are the policies that are available. So we continue to do that, and last year we started doing another intervention with UNICEF Malawi on adolescent girls' leadership in emergency areas, which was focusing on like those adolescent girls that are based in like rural communities. So for me, I'm looking at Paris Agreement because it has an element of intergenerational equity as a guiding principle shaping climate action. So for us, it's like, we don't want, like as Amanda has already said, it shouldn't just be like a one-off engagement. like just a matter of like ticking the box to say, oh, young people were also involved. Because we are trying to build the future. We are saying we are building the future. We want to make the future better, but whose future really are we making if the people who are going to be there at that time are not even involved? We have like Agenda 2063 right now for Malawi. How many young people can actually fully narrate what are the enablers of Agenda 2063? Because the people who have like started the Agenda 2063, by 2063, they're not going to be there. It's going to be those young people and children who are going to be there at that time. And for us to achieve generational success, it means we need to start like while they're still young. When we say children and youth engagement, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are leaving the policies in their hands to actually draft or design those policies. It actually means that they are part of the process from like development to implementation, and also trusting them to I actually know that, as she said, to say, okay, negotiations. I'm here as a negotiator this time around, and I've been like negotiating for like 3 years now. But sometimes it's about consistency as well. You might have young people this time around, you support them to say they should attend negotiations. Next year, they're not there. It means that there's no consistency, or there's no one way in which they can continue to be like in the process, because that's not like a one-time off. UNFCCC processes, like it takes a lot of time for you to be able to understand the text, or to even be able to like make your input in there. So when we say young people's engagement or children's engagement, they need to be at the center, and they should be able to understand what's happening, and they should be able to speak for themselves. We don't want someone to say, I'm speaking for children. Where are the children? And we say we are speaking for young people. Where are the young people? They should be representing themselves, and then they should be able to understand the processes, be able to say, this is what's happening. When you say NDCs, this is what NDCs are saying. And our country, this is what our country is planning on doing, and this is where we want to see ourselves. So that by the time we are also reviewing, we should be able to say, okay, this is what was in our NDCs, and this is how we're engaged, and this is how we think we can move forward. So let me stop there for now. Thank you.
Brenda, please don't stop. If it's okay, we'll stay with you just for a moment, because the point that you made, I mean, what we're also speaking about here, what we also really want out of this entire COP process, and particularly this session, is to take some of the amazing learnings that you've had through this. So if you had to distill it down, how should the involvement of young people work in an NDC process? In an ideal world, what should be done? How would you have it work?
I would say, as I already said in the first place, to say, not just in the design or the consultation also, but then let's get to a point where we can actually see young people as important stakeholders for us to achieve our NDC's goals. And then also let's make sure that there's continuity in how we are involving the young people. We don't want to just be involved when it comes to like screaming in the streets. We don't want to just have our voices in the streets. We also want to have our voices heard even inside the negotiation processes, even inside the decision-making processes, even inside the policy development processes. As right now, for example, countries are like in the process, like our country hasn't even submitted NAPs, right? But then we also want to be part of the process. We don't want to just see the NAPs that have been submitted, but we want to be part of the process to say, what are national adaptation processes? What is it that we want to see moving forward? And as young people, what is it that how can we be actively engaged in the process? And then also that continuity in ensuring that when we're involving them, can we have those who are understanding like the process and be the ones who can actually take the baton and actually like bring other people on board, so that as we're moving forward, like when you are like sharing with someone like your peer, I think it makes sense when like your peer is telling you to say, okay, this is how I started the process and this is how it moves and all of that. Because you know that I think if he or she is able to do that, then I can do it. So yeah.
Brenda, thank you. And Madame Perea, if it's all right, we'll just move to you just for a minute. You spoke so well about the experience of Uruguay in terms of conducting workshops, making sure young people were in the process from the very beginning to a successful NDC process. If it's all right, Madame, would also love to hear your experience of, from the NDC, how did that translate over into finance and implementation? And also, this is COP. We know that if the climate crisis had been solved, we would not be here for COP28. Would love to hear from your experience about what more can be done, and perhaps not even from your experience of Uruguay, but where do you see the lack or the roadblocks from translating policy into action in finance?
Bien. Primero que nada, yo creo que el gran desafío que había en un principio es justamente involucrar a los jóvenes en las políticas públicas. Yo creo que eso era un desafío muy importante que creo que lo pudimos empezar a sortear. No voy a decir que es lo ideal, pero bueno, hemos empezado a sortearlos porque bueno, esa instancia generó dos cosas. Uno, por un lado, que ellos pudieran volcar sus sus aportes, claro, sí, sus opiniones, Eva. Sus opiniones en la NDC para construirla, y por otro lado también se generó un compromiso por parte de ellos para empezar a trabajar, porque que no quede solamente en el documento de la NDC, esto también hay que empezar a construirlo, más que dejarlo involucrado en la NDC. Por otro lado también el tema de generar un vínculo con los jóvenes, yo creo, y acá tengo un ejemplo de Sofía, que hemos generado un lindo vínculo con los jóvenes y que esperamos, obviamente, como desafío también poder llegar a más jóvenes. Si podemos llegar a todo el territorio nacional, mejor. Si podemos sensibilizar a más jóvenes, también mejor. Y si podemos escalar a nivel regional, creo que sería ideal en este sentido para poder llegar a todo eso. También el otro desafío que también es importante, nosotros intentamos hacerlo este año y el año pasado, pero bueno, fue muy breve porque bueno, era un comienzo, era justamente llevar a los jóvenes a lugares, en este caso en Uruguay los llevamos a las playas, donde ellos pudieron ver en vivo, en directo, digamos, cómo es un proceso de adaptación en la playa. O sea, que no es algo que lo lean, que lo vean en su territorio, que vean en su país cuáles son los procesos de adaptación, cómo se realiza el proceso de adaptación, cómo lo que está volcado en un documento luego se traduce en acciones en el país. Así que me parece que eso es algo que es muy importante, pero por supuesto, falta mucho. Como le decía, el Ministerio tiene 3 años, esperamos dejar una semilla para que esto justamente se siga creciendo. Como les decíamos, al principio eran 40 jóvenes, este año participamos con 70, y bueno, esperamos que el año que viene también sigamos sumando más jóvenes y que sea un escalamiento superior en ese sentido. ¿Es difícil? Es difícil, es un proceso difícil, no hay que decir que no lo es, pero bueno, también eso yo creo que es parte del trabajo que tiene que hacer uno también como representante, ¿no?, de estas políticas públicas.
Madame Pereira, thank you very, very much. And again, thank you to all of our panelists. We know how busy you are. We soon will as Amanda mentioned, we'll soon have a very short demo of what some of the data platform and the data tools that exist to be able to assess how young people have been both involved and are reflected in NDCs. But before we do, Amanda, if we could go to you just for a minute. You brought up a really important statistic that there's less, I think 2% or so was the number that you mentioned of support requests that come to the NDC partnership involve an explicit focus on young people and youth. And as the NDC partnership, I mean, your role is to be able to effectively service the requests that do also come in. But perhaps just also taking advantage of the fact that you can speak of it from a little bit being on the other side. In your view, what are some of the things that can be done to increase the demand from member states?
So I think there's a couple things that can be done, and events like this are a big part of it. And so talking about the imperative of having youth part of the conversation. We are doing some work right now looking at whole of society approaches and looking at it from different angles. And this is an approach, a framework that we're actually applying to everything that we do in our knowledge work over the next year. And so, again, not just looking at ticking the box with stakeholders, but meaningfully, if we're looking at different sectors, if we're looking at different levels, we're looking at different stakeholder groups, thinking about those individual entry points and making sure that our partners and our government members are thinking about that as well. So the youth engagement plan gives some of those entry points. It helps our members to think through when we're doing a workshop in country. Are we inviting the right people to the table? And what you were saying as well, you know, not just that we're inviting them once, but are we consistently inviting people to be part of the conversation so that they can build on it? When it comes to the implementation, are we thinking about the activities and how they're differentiated to different groups? But are we also thinking about the indicators and how we're measuring our progress? So there's a lot of different things that we can do that I'm hopeful will help to raise the importance of the issue. But the other thing is that, as I mentioned, I think it's already in there as well. It's just a matter of us also teasing it out. So it's a little bit about generating the demand, but it's also about teasing out some of these opportunities and helping partners and countries to understand, really building off of some of the positive experiences that we heard from today.
Amanda, thank you. The danger with being a moderator is, unfortunately, you have the mic, but so I should stop at this moment and ask for amongst our audience, we have an amazing group and an amazing panel up here. Any questions for them before we roll on? There's one in the back. I don't know if we do mics or if you just speak up. Oh, there's a mic right behind you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to know how can we make sure that we have a representative group of youth and children participating in the construction of NDCs? How can we make sure that you have a sample or that represents the participation of young people in the construction of the new NDCs?
I think that's a great question, and a great question which, if it's all right, each of the panelists might have a slightly, coming at it from slightly different things. So the question, how can we, what can we do to make sure that the participation of young people in the NDCs is more representative? Perhaps, if it's all right, we can start with Brenda, and then Ms. Perea, and then over you.
Thank you so much for the question. From my perspective, I'd say governments always work with different youth networks and youth groups. So getting those youth networks and youth groups is like a good platform to ensure that there's youth representation and not just like randomly sampling out young people to say, oh, we had youth presentation. But through the networks and youth groups that they're already working with, I think that's like a great platform to ensure there's youth engagement. Thank you.
Bueno, en mi opinión, también un poco comparto lo que decía la colega. Aprovechar justamente los ámbitos de red de jóvenes que ya tienen experiencia. Nosotros hemos tenido la experiencia que con Acción Climática Joven en Uruguay del año 2023, nos acompañaron justamente los jóvenes de Acción Climática 2022 en algunas instancias, porque bueno, ya estaban preparados, entonces ellos mismos también participaban en instancias para preparar a estos jóvenes, y bueno, la idea es hacer un resorte en ese sentido. Entonces ahí generas dos cosas. Uno, que extendés lo que es la cantidad de jóvenes sensibilizados con el temática, y por otro lado, los jóvenes que se vienen preparando y que vienen participando se siguen involucrando y no se corta nunca la cadena de involucramiento con la institucionalidad.
Thank you.
Let me give, I could give lots of challenges and opportunities here, but let me give one, which is on capacity building. And I think this needs to be approached from two sides. One is capacity building for young people to be able to meaningfully engage in these processes so that when the opportunity is presented, it's taken full advantage of. The other, though, is capacity building on the side of government officials to ensure that they understand the opportunities and the importance and how to engage young people meaningfully in those processes. So capacity building is what I would say.
Any other ones? I have one more, but please. It's over there? Oh, yeah.
Thank you. My name is René van Hel, and I'm representing the Netherlands in the steering committee of the NDC partnership. And I just would like to take the opportunity to support very much, express my support for what you're doing, because this is exactly what we want. So it's not only from, let's say, countries from the global south, but we also from the north or from Europe also feel that this is important. So I hope that it will also inspire you in what you're doing. And of course, we're a supporter of UNICEF, and we very strongly feel that this is super important, because the only way to get ahead and get us further out of this climate crisis, which is a health crisis, which is a development crisis, is to get as many voices on board who are creative and innovative. And oftentimes we're acting out of our bubbles, or we're acting out of our generation bubble. And by involving children and young people, we at least give ourselves an opportunity to operate a little bit outside our generation bubble. And that's why we're so happy about this, and that's also why we're supportive of this event, that it takes place now. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you and very much for the Dutch government, both the support to the NDC partnership and also for young people and young people worldwide. As a final question, do we have any more from the audience? The problem is I get to take advantage. As a final question, Brenda, and we'll do this if it's all right for each of the panel, and the theme will be a little bit of the same. But Brenda, you go out and people tell you, Brenda, you know, young people, they shouldn't be doing this. What is it? This is policy. This is all this, no. For young people, you should be at home, you should be in school, you study hard. And then maybe once you grow up, you think about this policy stuff. What do you say to them?
I would give them an example to say the climate crisis really is not making an exception on young people and youth. Because when floods hit, when droughts hit, everybody is equally affected. So unless if climate crisis now gives an exception to say young people and children should be left out, then and only then can we say young people should be left out of policy-making processes.
Thank you. Madame Pereira, in a similar manner, there's so many demands on your ministry, the NDC process, as you're trying to put it together from a government, it is always so busy, there are always so many competing demands. Colleagues come to you and say, look, young people, look, we know we all care about our children. We will do what's right for them. There's really no reason to complicate this entire process by having young people at the table. Why do you want to take young people to the beach? Why do you want to do these workshops? It'll just be a lot simpler if we just do it ourselves and we don't need to have them here. What is your message to people like that?
Bueno, creo que lo hago corto. Los jóvenes son los que contagian. Venimos también de una institucionalidad que cuesta involucrar estos temas, sobre todo los temas ambientales, los temas de cambio climático, y yo creo que al contrario, a los jóvenes hay que involucrarlos, porque los jóvenes son los que pues contagian, a los que generan políticas públicas.
Thank you for that. And Amanda, people, the NDC partnership, and also the support that you provide to member states. People come and say, look, it's clear we don't really see member states kind of asking for this. You yourself said that there was 2%. Let's drop this entire youth engagement plan. We really don't need to have it be part. What's your message?
So my message would be that if we actually want the NDCs to be implemented, we need to be engaging the people who matter, and we need to be engaging the people who are benefiting from it. and the people who will ultimately be responsible for carrying those actions forward. If you don't engage the end users from the beginning, we're going to end up with policies, we're going to end up with plans that just don't respond to the reality of the needs on the ground. The other side of it is the buy-in. People don't like just being handed and given something. Not that it's an arrogance thing, but if you don't engage the right people in the conversation, it's not going to speak to them. They're not going to feel committed to it. They're not going to feel the buy-in. And we know that we need to act faster. We know that we need to do more. And that's going to require everyone around the table being extremely committed to this process. It's an easy thing to engage people from the beginning, but the benefits that that will have will be immense.
Amanda, thank you. We have just a couple. Do we have a question? One more? Of course.
Sorry, but then why you focus on NDCs and not in local strategies, the national strategies and policies at national level?
If I can, I would say it's yes and. And so the NDCs are one tool, but critically important is localizing those to the levels. And so I would say everything I said translates exactly to that. The same issues are important, the same engagement is important.
Brenda, Madame Maria, anything to add?
I would say, concurring with what Amanda has already said, NDCs are context-based, depending on like the situation in your country. What is it that you want to see, and what is it that you want to achieve in your country? So already NDCs are localized because it's how you want to, like what's the situation in your country and what is it that you want to achieve.
Sí, pienso lo mismo. La NDC justamente es nuestro lineamiento, es nuestra base para luego poder bajar todas esas involucramientos. Además, hay que tener en cuenta que son documentos vinculantes. Yo creo que más vinculación con los jóvenes que plasmar sus propuestas en una NDC, yo creo que ya es un paso muy importante.
Thank you, everybody. I think we're coming close to the end of time, but before we did, one of the things that we also wanted to highlight during the course of this COP was to be able to highlight some of the resources that are out there as a first basis for even answering the question. I mean, we've spoken about the importance of having young people be represented in the NDCs, ensuring that when an NDC is produced, that it's reflective of the things that children most need. So we wanted to take just a couple of minutes to highlight one of the products that's out there. So this is a piece of work that UNICEF, but working very much with partners, has put together, and essentially is a global atlas of how child-sensitive NDCs are, and it's built upon an analysis of all the NDCs that have been submitted to the UNFCCC since 2019. And it essentially looks at NDCs by 4 key criteria. The first, does the NDC even refer to children and young people, almost as a baseline? The second, does it recognize that children and young people have rights and the representation of these rights need to be part of the NDC? The third, does the NDC focus on the things that we know have the greatest impact upon child development? Essential services like water, health, education, nutrition, protection. Are these adequately reflected in the NDCs, and are these targeted towards particularly children and young people? And fourth, when the NDC was developed, did it adequately consider or even consider the inclusion of children and young people? Or simply put, were children and young people even a part of the NDC formulation? So when you put that together, you have a global atlas categorized according a few different ways. We spoke about 4 criteria. The color coding on the map just represents how many of those criteria were fulfilled. But really the benefit of this is the underlying data that's behind it. So here's a summary representation, but going behind it, you kind of have each of the many indicators, and I believe there were between 20 and 40 indicators that kind of went through. How many? There were 40? There were 41 indicators that overall kind of get color-coded into this, and this underlying data is we've found useful to be able to work with and support governments to be able to have a greater inclusion of children and young people and the issues that affect them within their NDCs. just as a, within this, and this is all a website, we didn't want to risk IT, so we just had static slides, but you can click onto each of those countries, and then underneath each of the countries, you kind of see the different parameters under which the categories were done. For example, the first, as I mentioned, was inclusion. Were children and young people considered? Are their rights recognized? Have they been referenced? And then also inside each of these multi-sectoral commitments, are there particular commitments around the things that we know have the greatest impact upon child development, such as health and food and energy? And particularly, when some of these commitments are there, is there also a recognition that these should be for the needs of children? For example, it's important to talk about a digital transformation in an NDC. But it's also important to talk about having digital education for young people so they can be a part of that transformation. So this outlines some of that data. And we have found this to be useful also, and we're hoping it will be in trying to helping to inform the next round of NDCs that come up, because it gives us a bit of a starting point and allows us to have a bit of a targeting to know what are some of the areas that we can best also work with member governments in trying to enhance. And with that, I want to say, first of all, thank you very, very much. Most importantly, to our panel, Amanda McKee from the NDC Partnership, Madame Parrea, thank you from the Ministry of Environment of Uruguay. Thank you so much. And Brenda, thank you very, very much for coming all the way from Malawi. So from UNICEF and the NDC Partnership, once again, thank you very, very much.